those of you that don't know, my name is Dave Cherry, and along with my wife, Jothi, who is back there taking a couple photos. We are the owners of Ellie Mental Health, which is an outpatient mental health therapy clinic. We have 2 locations here in Columbus, in Westerville and Worthington, and part of the 3rd largest outpatient mental health system in the U.S. and the fastest growing franchise in the U.S. for the last couple of years. So we're really excited to be able to bring Ellie Mental Health to Columbus and really connect with the community in ways in terms of providing therapy, but also facilitating conversations like this. And tonight's conversation is From Heartbreak to Healing, talking about understanding the mental health journey of a childhood cancer diagnosis or really any kind of trauma. And in addition to some fantastic panelists with you, we have one of our favorite people, Angela Ann, who I'm sure you guys all know, who is fantastic. And so many different charity events that she shows up and donates her time, and we're just so grateful that you're lending your skills and friendship and support to our conversation tonight. So with that, I will hand it over to Angela.
Dave, thank you, and hello, friends. So glad that so many of you decided to come out here and share your evening with us, because when Jennifer first brought this idea up to me and said who would be involved, including the Hares and Ellie Mental Health, I said absolutely. This is a conversation that I think that needs to be had, because I think, as many of us know as parents, when you have a child that's hurt or, in your case, diagnosed with cancer, you put yourself last, right? And what you're thinking and feeling just goes on the back burner. And as we all have learned post-COVID, is that we have to take care of ourselves just as much. So I'm so glad to be here. So I'm going to introduce our panelists that are with us today. Over to my far right, I first want to say hello to Jennifer and her daughter, Chloe. Hi. And for those of you who are streaming and watching us from home or wherever you are, thank you very much for doing so. We also have a slideshow, so you can see some photos about the Hunters, but a little bit about Jennifer. Her son Jacob learned that he had acute myeloid leukemia when he was a sophomore at New Albany High School. He was 15. Jacob is with us. Stand up, because you are much taller than a sophomore now, but Jacob's here with some of his friends, and together they created a team for Leukemia Lymphoma Society called Jacob Hunts Down Cancer, which I just love because it just sounds like he's this warrior and he's going to lead the charge. So thank you for being here. We also have the Hares to my left, Kate and Matt. I've actually known them for more than a decade, but that's another story. But I did a story about Kate and Matt and their son Callahan in 2021. They started a foundation in his name soon after Callahan was diagnosed with infant acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And when I tell you this was within hours of his birth, so can you imagine the emotions of first bringing a new life into this world and then learning that your baby has this rare disease? So the prognosis, I know, was devastating for them, 20% chance of surviving 3 years. But in about a week and a half from now, Callahan will be 3 and a half. 3 and a half. So that is a lot to celebrate, because those halves really mean a lot, right? And then we also have from Ellie Mental Health, we have Alice Mills-Mai. Thank you for being here with us. She is the clinical director for Ellie Mental Health in Worthington. They just opened up that branch in May. You said in May. She's a licensed mental health counselor in both Ohio and New York. Your background is fascinating. I did Google. You're also trained in something called eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And that's a lot, but I said, what is that? And it's a technique that helps people heal from distressing life experiences with techniques with their eyes. So that is really fascinating to me, but she's also a proud daughter of immigrants from Ghana. So I'd like to say Akuba, which means welcome. Welcome. So I will start my first question with the parents, because as we talk about navigating this space, how did you handle, oh, don't start yet, because I'm going to start, but how did you handle the emotions, the mental health of yourself when you first heard those words, your child has cancer? Kate? There's a little button. Everyone turn on your button.
Now I'm on. I think even though I'm emotional in this moment, it was honestly such a shock. And I think, so Callahan's birth was very dramatic, And so I think I was kind of expecting that something was going on, but not that. And then I was just in shock when the NICU nurse came in and told us that, so his white blood cell count was nearly 3 times the high end of normal for a newborn. And they explained that when they see that, which it's very rare, but it's most likely cancer. And I mean, I was like this. I was like, what? I'm like, a baby can be born with cancer? Like, it wasn't even, and then I think you're just in that fight or flight, like immediately. That's kind of my response. And it's just like, all right, like, put your roller skates on. Like, what are we doing about this?
Was there ever a time, or how long did it take for you or Matt to finally say, okay, I've gone up and down this emotional roller coaster a million times. I need to do something for myself, otherwise I'm going to lose it.
Sorry, feedback. It was tough because Campbell at home as well. So we had a 3-year-old at the time, 4, she's 18, I don't know, at home. And so trying to even juggle, okay, what do? We need someone to take care of her. We're going to be here with him. And so I don't know that we ever really got to a point of zooming out and being able to think about ourselves until probably a month or so in, once we got into the new normal of what our life was going to be.
Well, I have a different answer than that. Everyone can hear me. Yeah. It's not working. Oh, there it is. That's so weird. The light was on. I did not engage with trying to find a therapist or anything until, that was May of 2022 or June. So it was like over a year after. And I think all of you who have been through this, you're juggling so many things, and that does, like mental health, it falls to the very bottom. And that's why I think this conversation is so important, because you shouldn't get to that, like literally having a mental breakdown before you're like, I need to process this.
Yeah. Before we get to you, Jennifer, Alice, as you're listening to this, I'm sure you have heard similar stories from other parents. And so you have a dad who says, like, maybe it took me about a month, but a mom who's like, listen, I didn't even realize till about a year down the road. Is there a right time frame at all, or what do you tell your clients?
Yeah, I think the right time frame will be maybe as soon as you get the diagnosis, or even sometimes as you're preparing to be a parent, because even the journey of carrying a baby, that in of itself has its own mental health stuff, and then delivery and all of those things. So sometimes before that, but as soon as you get the diagnosis, I think that would be a great place for somebody to help you to process all these emotions that you are talking about. And I think also maybe for moms, moms really don't think about themselves. It's like, I'm in mom mode, so that's all that I'm going to do. I don't come, like you said, until you get to that place where you're like, oh, I have to do something, or this is like an emergency. Then when you get to that place, sometimes then it becomes difficult to get you to a stable place for you to maybe start processing stuff. But as soon as you hear the diagnosis, I think that would be if hospitals or if doctors can recommend people like.
And I wonder if that's even part of the process that should be implemented in the medical field, right?
You all know it's such a blur. It is part of the process. There is a psychologist involved. I remember, and I would love to hear your take on this for anyone going through something that doesn't, it is like that extra thing that you don't want to deal with. And so I remember, like, we used to kind of like laugh about it a little bit. Whenever we would see the psychologist coming, I was like, I don't want to talk about this right now.
Go away.
And because when you're in the midst of treatment, it is like a rotating door. Someone is always coming in, and you're like, I just had a really hard conversation about something clinical with my child, and now I'm dealing with that, and now is not a time for me, but you've just walked in. So I do think that the hospital does a good job of trying to implement that, but I think there are challenges with the patients and parents.
Yeah, I can understand what you said, right? Because right when you hear the news, you are in shock. You are in fight or flight mode, right? And sometimes when we are in a state like that, our frontal lobe isn't even working. All that we are focusing on for you as a parent is, how do I keep this child alive? And so to sit and to talk about your emotions, that's like a luxury. Like, I cannot do it. And sometimes also we avoid the painful stuff because then you have to confront some emotions that you don't want to confront. Or you could feel like, oh, if I get there, maybe I'm not going to get back, or it's going to take me about 3 hours after maybe an hour of a session to come back to, in a way, normal. So I'm not even going to deal with this in a way, yeah.
Jennifer, did you seek any kind of advice, guidance, therapy? Was your frontal lobe working in that moment?
We can ask Chloe if I had a frontal lobe. Probably not. I think, with Jacob, it was so shocking because he was in the hospital for something else, right? It was ITP, and I remember what it stands for, and the hematologist came in and sat down next to me, and I instantly tracked that. I was like, because the other time I met her, she sat down next to Jacob. And she said that Jacob had leukemia, and I lost it. And, he was 13, so old enough to get it. And, hyperventilating, sobbing, he was right there. His dad was there, I was there, and he was sitting there. So oftentimes, parents are told separately. So you have that shock, and I always thought about how he saw me lose it. And then having your kid ask you if he could die is horrible. And I remember, I don't know if Jacob remembers this or not, I don't know how I had the fortitude to say this, but I said, Jacob, you could also die. I said yes, because he's 13, he had a phone, he could Google. And I said yes. I said, but you know what, Jacob, you could also die going in the car on the way to Kroger. And I said, nobody is dying here. And, but she instantly knew. She knew something was wrong. And you just go into, once you're through the shock, you just go into activation mode. And you just have to go. And as Kate said, you have all of these, the specialists upon specialists upon specialists. So a little bit, I talked to his therapist because they offer therapy at Children's. And I would talk to her a little bit in the hallway. But but I didn't go out and seek it because also I was like, how am I going to fit that in? I am a mom, and, we're staying with Jacob, between him and his dad and myself staying there overnight. I have Chloe at home who's, she was going into 6th grade and all of those things. So it just becomes tackle what's next, tackle what's next, tackle what's next in front of you, and you put yourself last.
So it's more mechanical than mental health, right? It sounds like you literally have to schedule, okay, take a breath at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then at 9 a.m. start the meds or whatever you have to do.
Right, yeah.
So how did you manage, and you had Chloe who's younger than Jacob, but you guys have Campbell who's older than Callahan, and she was only 4 years old at the time, so very different age-wise, but still you had siblings that you had to somehow explain what's happening. And I'll have you describe how you talked to Chloe and then Campbell, and then I want you, Alice, to weigh in on how do you help the siblings go through that. Jennifer?
I think, Chloe, she had been at a photo shoot that day. And
you can weigh in, Chloe. You can be like, Mom, that's not what I was doing.
And she was dropped off, and I was impressed about how she knew how to navigate through Children's, and you have to go through all this wiggling. I thought, we don't really need to know because we're only going to be here for 4 days. And she got in the elevator, and she knew. She instantly knew, and telling her was horrible. And I think, and I'll let her talk to this, but I think she had the shock, and then it's this whole you're just trying to make sure that you're positive yet realistic, and you're supportive, and you're not it's just, and there's no playbook, right? Nobody tells you what you're supposed to do. No one ever thinks, and I've said this before, that lightning strikes that close to home. You just, how are you going to practice that? So it's, but I'll let her.
So Chloe, how did you
say.
handle the news?
Yeah, so it was definitely a shock, and it was honestly like really hard to process at first, and it's just things that like you hear about like online and stuff, and you just never really think that it could actually happen to you. And I was old enough where I knew what cancer was, and I knew like the risks and the possibility, but it was still so hard to like process that something actually happened to someone especially so close to me.
Did you have conversations, or did you find conversations maybe with Jacob easier to have than with your parents? And like saying, dude, tell me what's going on, and like wanting to know more. Was that helpful to you through that journey?
Yeah, I was honestly, sorry. I've always been like interested in like medical, so I always was interested in like different tests that was happening. I didn't really, if I'm being honest, didn't talk to Jacob that much, at least not privately, without our parents in the room, but I definitely had conversations with my parents about like the possibilities and like different tests and like the risks of what he was going through.
Can you share some moments though where you thought to yourself, I wonder what's going to happen, and maybe that fear was in your mind of what's going to come tomorrow, and how did you as a sixth grader go through that?
Yeah, so it was difficult just because of how young I was, and I honestly just tried to not put it in my mind of like the possibility like he could die. So I just tried my hardest not to think about that and not to jump to like worst case scenario, because I knew that if I did that, then it would just kind of like smother me and like smother my thoughts, and I didn't want to do that to myself.
Sounds like survival mode. So Alicia, let's, before we get to the hairs, because they have the younger children, talk about, for many of the parents that might be watching, when they have children that can Google and can understand the complexities, what are those steps that they should take?
So one of the things I would say, as much as it's difficult to be honest with your children, because there is a whole bunch of information on the internet, and they can get into a rabbit hole and know a whole bunch of things. So being honest is one of it. Also opening the line of conversation to let them know, we can talk about this. Come to me if you have questions. And also focusing on the emotional aspect of it, that I know sometimes parents want to be like, I want to be strong for my children. But sometimes you actually acknowledge, and this is difficult, and I don't even know what's going on here, or I'm also struggling, but we are going to figure it out together. Give them the permission also to have those kind of emotions, to acknowledge that, oh, this is difficult, or I don't have to put a face for my parents, or I don't have to perform that. We are actually going through a tough time, and it's okay. As a family, we will get through it together.
And I'll interject one thing real quick then. I don't know if it was right, wrong, but from a personal experience, when my husband went through a recent health crisis, my daughter said to me, she's in sixth grade, Mom, I haven't seen you cry yet. Are you, like, do you not care? And I just thought, whoa, as parents, we put on that, we can do this, and come on, we're gonna, tighten up our buckle straps and do that. And I said, honey, just because I didn't cry doesn't mean I'm not hurting inside. And then I cried, right? And then I was like, okay, it's all coming out now. And she's like, oh my gosh, now what do I do? But I think that gave me permission to show some emotion, and then we talked about it, right? Like how different people handle things differently. But how should parents of children of younger age walk through that counseling with their children? Because Campbell was only 4, and I know that, I think I even asked you guys this way back then, of like, how did you explain to Campbell what's happening with her baby brother? Do you remember?
Yeah, so I went home like the next night. I had to go home the next night because she's very attached to mommy. And, she was expecting a baby to come home. And so I almost think it was like a benefit to me, because she's 4. She doesn't know what cancer. And so you really kind of like dumb it down, not to sound, bad, but, we said, something about, he's sick, and we said his blood is sick, and he needs to stay at the hospital for a little while. We're not sure how long. And she accepted that. And then as the days and everything went on, she started asking more questions, and it was always, I think you said this, as time really went on, over like the years, it opened up that conversation of, it's okay to like feel sad or feel upset or frustrated, because I think in siblings, and maybe especially younger siblings, you can see, we went through a phase of like an outburst of behavior. And I think because after so long, she was on a back burner. And unfortunately, she was. And so there's that outburst of behavior. And so that opened up a lot of conversations of, let's talk about how you're feeling. And it's okay that we're like angry sometimes. And, we're a family and we're going to work through this. The hospital, though, I will say also their child life group is incredible. So I can't speak to what they do for older children, but for younger children, they made a book actually and like customized it to Callahan. I'm sure some of you experienced the same thing. And it really, it explained to her what was going on. They had pictures of the 12th floor, of what his room looked like. And then they continued that. So we ended up being inpatient for the first 8 months. And so the Child Life would send her every couple of weeks a letter that was like from a fairy. And it was like they were checking in on her and like letting her know how her brother was. And it just helped her feel connected to the situation that she was completely separated from.
How did that help you guys, Matt? And maybe you can talk about this as a parent, to know that basically you had a third partner in this that was taking care of Campbell so that you could focus on Callahan. Was it relief, but was there also guilt in this way of saying, gosh, I should be doing that, but thank goodness someone else is right now?
Yeah, we just didn't know how, like Kate said, to approach it with her, because we did go from saying, like, you're going to school and the next day or two there's going to be a baby, to the baby's not coming home yet, and also we're going to rotate nights at home. So one of us was always with Callahan. And so to have them, it really felt like a wraparound approach to his diagnosis. One thing worth mentioning too, we're there all day. Callahan gave us a lot of scares along the way with relapse and things like that. And there would be nights where, we had been at the hospital all day, working from the hospital, to Kate's point, like liver doctor, cancer doctor, everybody coming in, and like the fuse gets like that. And going home, like I remember a couple of times where maybe we were waiting on like a bone marrow biopsy for Callahan, and like one night I just was sobbing, and I tried not to show like the dramatic reaction to her, but she was like, "What's wrong?" And I was like, "I'm scared. I'm scared for Callahan." And so just trying to be as open as possible through that in whatever age appropriate way you can, but also I wanted her to know that if she saw us frustrated or maybe tense, that there was a reason behind that.
Do you think, Alice, when parents show that vulnerability, it lets the children know even more so that it's okay for them to do it too?
Yes, it helps them also to know that, okay, maybe I'm feeling the same way, because especially for little children, they like to make up stories about things. And also, in their mind, the world revolves around them. And it does, right? So if there is any tension at home, or even sometimes if you don't tell them and their sibling is not coming home, they can make up this idea, oh, is it because of me that they're not coming home? Why are they not coming home? Is mommy sad because of me, or did I do something wrong? So just being able to be open with them and having age-appropriate things, because you also don't want to overwhelm them as well. So it can be very delicate, and I think for parents, it would be good to get them into therapy, so that sometimes play therapy can help them to process some of those things, or to, in a way, tell what is on their mind that they may not have the words to say as well. Yeah.
she did a couple of times felt like you guys just care about Callahan. And because we were with him all day, she's like, I have to go to school. And it's like, well, we would much rather him be at home and us all be together. But we tried to really, and she didn't get to meet him until he was 4 months old.
Well, she met him when he was 7 weeks old, but then she only met him 2 times before the day he went home. So the day he went home was the 3rd time. So, but we tried to do things like FaceTime, and that comes with a lot of other challenges, though, of missing whoever the parent is that's there. But so there's a lot to navigate, as I'm sure you all know, and we just find different ways to kind of manage and cope.
It sounds like making sure there is intentional time of value with the siblings, right? And did that help? And Jennifer and Chloe, maybe you guys can weigh in, because I'm sure you did that too, Jennifer, right? Where you guys switched on and off, said, okay, I'll be with Jacob, or I'll take him to this, and I've got Chloe on something. Did that help ease any of that sense of guilt or neglect that you were neglecting your other child by making intentional moments together?
I'll say I tried. So, and I know, it's those times when you're in it, you're just like, it's just like one more day and one more day. And Jacob and Chloe's dad and I are divorced. So, there's only one parent at home. And because Jacob was inpatient as well, and most of you know, but we overlapped. I mean, that's how Kate, Matt, and I met, when Matt was pushing Callahan around in a stroller while working. And but I think, the things that was really hard too is that, there needed to be another adult there. So, there was times when my dad and my stepmom came up. My mom came down once. My brother came up 3 times. And, it's really that, she was shuffled around. She luckily had really good friends that were going on vacation. It was because Jacob was diagnosed in July, and so it was still summertime, and they took her for a week, So I had to really count on other people to be able to help her feel supported. So I think it just added an extra layer of complication. But I don't know why I just thought, as you're saying that one day we went out to lunch and shopping with a girlfriend of mine, and it was like, okay, what are the things that we can do to kind of feel like normal? But also I was like, the being at the hospital, and I have my own business, and I have a daughter, and like all of these things, and then you just run out of time in the day. And Chloe is also, I think we laugh about this, she was probably about that age or so, where she's like, I know how to do everything in this house but drive a car and pay bills. So she's also really self-sufficient. So, but it's also like, I shouldn't rely on that too, because she's a kid and she needs help and support.
But Chloe, for you, did it feel like that was your contribution to the cause, right? Like, did you feel like, okay, I'm going to step up for Jacob and for my mom and for my dad? Like, did it help you navigate all the challenges and the mental health?
Yeah, definitely. I think I could see the struggle that my parents were going through, and so I knew not to add an extra burden onto their back. So to just try and help out around the house, or at least stay in charge and get my homework done and just do all that, really trying to just make their lives easier because they already had a lot to deal with.
Wow.
I mean,
really, wow.
But
that's a lot of weight
to
put on yourself, right? 6th grade, so you were 10, 11. Alice, from your perspective, right? A 10, 11-year-old saying, okay, I'm going to step up, I'm going to take care of everything but the bills. And
yeah, she turned 12. She was 11 turning 12. I was 12 during the time.
For people who might be watching streaming, or people in the audience, what are some good coping mechanisms for kids in that age range where, they want to be the adult in the house now?
Yeah. I think it's for parents to remind them that they are still children. Because they can feel like, I have to grow up, and also to remind them to still do things that kind of reminds them of their childhood. That, yes, this is going on, and it's okay for you to go out with your friends. It's okay to make mistakes as well. It's okay to be silly, right? It's okay if you cannot cook. It's okay. that you're doing this. It's the intention that matters, because her life doesn't stop, unfortunately, right? So it becomes then difficult, because there are things that children or teenagers can internalize as well, that if they don't have the right coping skills, everybody handles things differently. Chloe handled it differently, but there may be other people that may turn into other maladaptive behaviors that it could end wrongly for them.
Different
Yeah.
mechanisms.
Yeah.
For them. I want to take a moment real quick to pause, because I feel like I want to know who's here watching us. I know people are streaming, but I know, Jacob, you're here with some of your friends, so thank you guys for choosing to come out on a school night. I know over here we have our friends from NC4K that are here as well, and we also have a therapy dog from Canine Companions. So if any of our panelists or anyone in the audience just feels like they might, what's the dog's name again, the therapy dog? Dahlia? Dahlia. Dahlia needs to be right here. I'm just saying. Feel free. Who else do we have? Just shout out. Hi. I'm going rogue. This is what I do. My producers at my station hate it when I do this. So Grayson, okay. And you guys are both representing Gold. Okay. And Grayson, tell us about yourself.
I'm Grayson, happily the brother of Elena Borman, and not really about myself, but I'm glad that she went through her journey of the disease that she had. I'm just really proud of her. She's a warrior.
Thank you. Let's give Grayson a round of applause. Thank you for being here. If you don't want to share, that's okay. I'm just coming through. NC4K. Oh yeah, that's right. Andrea, here somewhere. You guys have Light the Night that's coming up next week, so thank you for being here, but I'm sure these stories resonate with you guys.
Very much so. So Andrea and I are with the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and it's just things like this that's that reminder of why we need to work to find a cure and find the best possible treatments in the meantime. And we have Light the Night next Thursday, so definitely, look into that and come out for support. So
thank you.
All this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do you want me to go on, or do you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Megan. I'm one of Jennifer's friends. I worked on her lymphoma and leukemia society benefits this year. Yeah. So.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to switch over here, and Jason. Jason's actually a very dear friend of mine. Jason, stand up, because I don't think the streamers can see us, right? They're back there. Jason Bradley Krause. His husband, Chris Bradley, was on 10 TV. He was our meteorologist before he passed away, 2018, right? My gosh, it's been 2018. So thank you for being here. And I know a lot of these conversations probably resonate with what you had to go through with Spencer and Maria, your two children.
This conversation really does, because while I'm listening to this story, I'm really thinking about, as a parent, what I would have done with a child with blood cancer. With my husband in such dire straits in the hospital, I had to juggle the kids and his illness alone, and I also had to prioritize his care, and there were times I just couldn't leave him in the hospital, and the children's care, and there were times when I couldn't leave them and they needed a parent there. So, and also, I really found the discussion around mental health to be very interesting, and I would say one of the obstacles that I found was I loved hearing, like, I didn't go for mental health treatment for myself until a year later. We were 21 months into it before I was able to get to someone. At the hospital, I got a list of doctors, and I devoted half a day, which was so precious in time management, to try to find someone who could see me. And no one was accepting patients, and no one was accepting children, and it was like, this is a circus. And then to find out that it was 13 months, we can see you in 13 months when you feel like your hair is on fire. So yeah, it's a really fascinating discussion, and I really appreciate I'm learning a lot and thinking a lot, processing a lot about that time from a little different perspective. But yeah, thank you all.
Jason. Thank you so much. And I think that's why Ellie Mental Health is this new concept. So yes, Dave, I will give you a little plug, but Ellie Mental Health, when I first heard about this process, we hear stories like that. People can't get in to find anyone to talk to, and you guys are basically a walk-in clinic, right?
So almost, thanks Angela. So I love hearing stories like this, and thank you guys all for being here. When we talk about one of the things that makes Ellie really different is we always talk about access, and my wife Jyoti unfortunately had to leave, but when we talk about access to care, it really comes in three components. One is when you come into Ellie, you're gonna find a therapist that you can connect with, and whether that is young, old, man, woman, gay, straight, black, white, piercings, tattoos, you name it. We have an incredibly diverse staff, so you're gonna find somebody who you feel comfortable with. The second thing is we accept about 35 different insurances. So we never want anybody to be recommended to us, and the answer is, sorry, Matt, we can't see you because we don't take your insurance. So Jyoti and I never wanted that to be the case, so we take all that. And then the third piece, which is so different, is we can get folks scheduled in less than a week. And most places right now, and you guys have seen what Jason said, Ohio State, with a great facility at Harding Hospital, 6-month plus wait list to get therapy. Children's right now is at 14 months. And that's just unacceptable to tell a parent or a spouse or a partner or anybody that you have to wait that long when you're dealing with something. And so there may be some specialists at those facilities. They're great facilities, and that's why their wait lists are so long. But at Ellie, we can get you in less than a week, and you can be seeing somebody like Alice who can help you understand what's going on while you're on those wait lists.
Thank you, and I think that's so important to bring up because when you finally say and have the courage to say, I need help, and then that door isn't open, that's the game changer, right? Then you put yourself back on the back burner. I do want to bring up a topic that Kate, you had mentioned in our pre-meeting, and it's so important I gave it its own page. But it is deep, so we're going to go deep for a little bit since we're in the middle of our session here, and it's talking about managing loss. And I think that managing loss is a topic that no one obviously wants to talk about, but there are many layers to this. The loss of a child, the loss of children perhaps that you became friends with in the hospital that are friends with your child, that came with you on that journey. Managing that relationship that you maybe now have with those parents that have experienced that loss, yet you're ringing that bell at Children's. And how do you manage those emotions? I mean, that is so polar opposite. So, Kate and Matt, I'll start with you both because from your perspective, and Matt, you have a very unique story. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about that as you talk about that, but share how you guys have managed that when you were able to bring Callahan home, but knowing that some of the dear friends that you guys made at the hospital didn't have that same experience.
Yeah, as Jennifer kind of joked about, I spent a lot of time pushing Callahan around the hospital because there wasn't much else that we could do. And oftentimes doors would be open and you would start conversations with other parents, other kids, and just you would then hear that so-and-so went home or potentially a different outcome. And there's just something about being on the 12th floor at Children's Hospital that is remarkably humbling, the people that are doing incredible work, but also sobering that you have, in Callahan's case, an infant to Jacob being a teenager and everything in between. And I remember we sat down with Tim Kripe, who's the head of oncology at Children's, and we were talking about research in particular, and just if you think about the kids that are lost to oncology and the cumulative years with that there were so many kids that we met on our time there, and whether they were 3, 6, a teenager, that ultimately lost their life to cancer, and just thinking about all of the things that they should have had ahead of them. It's really hard to reconcile. We were very grateful to bring Callahan home, but at the same time, it's hard not to think about the other parents. There was another dad that I got really close to, and I remember I was actually on a work call on the 12th floor. He called me, and I sent it to voicemail, and texted him and said, I'll call you back. Typically, we would go get dinner, and I was like, if you're going to be here tonight, I can get dinner. And didn't hear back, called him back, and he said that they had just lost their daughter. And I just remember thinking, like, this is so stupid that I was on a work call and didn't answer it. Obviously, if I would have known, I would have answered it. But I think about just the gap that it creates in their life, and you see that. What I've been so impressed by, though, by all the families that we've met, is they carry their children's lives forward in a really beautiful and tragic way, but they still talk about them, they still bring them up, and that's one of the things that has caused us, I know, to still be so involved, even though Callahan's not in active treatment, that just there are so many that have had not the outcome that they were praying for, but ultimately still just keep their children's memory and life alive.
How did you find the words to console your friend through that loss, while a lump in your throat and the fear as you're still in the hospital with Callahan is just right there?
I mean, it's honestly just there's no words, right? You just tell them you love them and you're sorry and that whatever they need. But it's just one of those things that everybody says that, right? Whatever you need. But it's literally the one thing that you can't fix. And when it's your child, and we talked about like just coping mechanisms in general, that like there's nothing you can do when it's your child. And to hear I felt like that his world had just been destroyed, and you just tell him you love him.
Alice, walk us through what we can say to parents like Matt and Kate and Jennifer when they're in those moments of anguish. I mean, this is a mental anguish where you are so sad for your friends and you're fearful of what might come tomorrow for yourself.
Yeah. I think just like Matt said, in those moments, there is nothing you can say. And sometimes listening is the best that you can do without offering anything, but just listening. And the other thing is also being very practical, because you talked about sometimes we tell people, let me know if you need anything. Okay, what does that mean? So you can be very practical.
Parent.
Yeah.
The person that's struggling.
Yeah.
Let me think of something
that I
to
need.
do.
Right? So if they have other children, oh, hey, I'm going to come for your kid this weekend so that you could have some time alone. I'm going to come over to your house and clean for you so that you could have some time. I'm going to come over, let's go for a walk together. Let's go get some food. So really being practical with them. And if you're in their space, if you're in their home and you notice they need something, maybe they need some work done around the home. Hey, Saturday I'm going to come over. I'm going to do this yard work for you. So you noticing what they need, because words cannot fill the gap. And sometimes also you have to let them know, hey, this sucks. I think that's the thing about therapy sometimes, where people get to have that objective person there to let them know this sucks. So if you want to cry, cry. If you want to be angry, just be angry. If you want to scream, just scream. It's okay. It sucks. And that's where we are right now. And I think what you're also talking about, dealing with grief. Often we talked about the 5 phases or the 5 experiences of grief. Actually, there is also a 6th one that talks about meaning. So finding meaning. And I think that's what you talked about, what the parent did, right? Because losing a person is one of those things that you cannot do anything about it. So how do you keep the person's memory going? How do you find meaning in this difficult things? And also when we talk about loss, it's not only also losing a person, but there are also intangible losses that parents may have to go through, because when parents are expecting a baby, they have dreams, they have expectations. And now they've lost those expectations. They had things that they were thinking about that, sometimes you lose your sense of hope, that you were so hopeful. Now you're like, anything can happen in the world. You lose your sense of safety. You feel like this world is not so safe anymore. And some parents could go into extreme mode, like, let's watch everything we eat, let's watch everything we drink. So that sense of safety, that sense of comfort that they used to have in the world, now they don't have it anymore. So it's not only about losing a person, but there are also some intangible losses that we may not acknowledge. And even the loss of time that you may not get back. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because it's, going into the first loss that we experienced, and unfortunately, we have experienced a lot of loss in our relationships, and it feels like a minefield. And I will not, I know there's survivor's guilt, and I feel like I don't ever want to say that, because I just feel like if we had lost Callahan, I would never want another parent to feel that way. I would want to see them enjoying their child and being so grateful. But the first, couple losses, it feels hard to navigate. And I've actually she's one of my best friends. It was another family who had infant leukemia. They weren't in state, but we got really close. And her and I, Maddie, she's up here, you might have seen her face. She passed away in 2022, and Jackie and I can have these really incredible, open conversations that I hope everyone in this space can have with someone when you have, we were on the same path and they ended differently. And that's been really hard to navigate, but it's been so great. And we try and talk about it openly because I think that's a good conversation to have. And for her, as a parent of loss, she always says, and I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. She's like, everyone in this world, the childhood cancer world, there's grief at so many different levels. It's not just loss. It's like what you thought your life was going to look like, what you were saying. And I just think that's such a great acknowledgement. And also wanting to backtrack to what you were talking about earlier, what do you say? I think so many of us get caught up in trying to say something really profound and people want to make it better. And no matter if it's a loss or if it's the diagnosis, nothing is going to make it better. And I just remember so clearly, I think it was a resident who, they change every couple weeks or whatever, and they came into our room when we first got to 12, and they were going through all the clinical stuff, and it was like a checklist, and then he just stopped. And it was so simple, but it was so meaningful. And this is all you need to say, is he was like, and just a general note, I'm really sorry this is happening to you. Mm-hmm. And that, I will remember that as I felt so seen in that moment. I was like, thank you for just acknowledging that this is a nightmare, mm-hmm. and there's nothing else you need to say. Mm-hmm. That's it.
No, it's a very good point, right? Being seen, heard, valued. Mm-hmm. Jennifer, what about you? I heard Alice talk about meaning, and Matt talking about his friend finding meaning. I feel like you guys have found meaning through the Callahan Hair Foundation, which is just amazing because it is just pushing research dollars for pediatric cancer. I'm learning more through her than I am through Google when it comes to only 4% of research dollars goes to childhood cancer, and that's amazing, right? And so you through LLS, one of the top warrior fundraisers this year, is that giving you purpose? Is that helping you push through because this big dark cloud of loss is always going to be looming?
Well, I kept a Caring Bridge journal when Jacob was in the hospital, and then kept up with it a little bit after that. And I remember having some type of thing saying, I don't know, I was so many other parents or families, you see the things that they are doing to push and continue. And I was I'm not quite sure what ours will be, but I know it'll be something. And the first two somethings first was blood drives, and I go here to New Albany UMC, and we say we give all the blood, and we've had 8, 9, I don't know, I've lost track how many blood drives we've had. The first one we had was when Jacob was in treatment, and the Red Cross ran out of supplies. So, like, literally over 1,000 lives have potentially been saved because of all of the blood that's been given. I had never given blood beforehand. I was chicken. He laughs at me whenever I'm, like, ready to vomit with getting my finger poked. But so that's been huge for us. And then also, Jacob, you know, when he was diagnosed, he said about 3 things he wanted to hashtag. And he wanted a Pelotonia Survivors t-shirt, and he wanted a Light the Night team. We had a dear friend that went to this church, and we had teams in her honor and then one in her memory. And that's where our journey really was amplified with LLS. And from that, we have our 4th Light the Night team next Thursday. We were the top fundraising team last year. Jacob was the 3rd highest in individual contributions. And then I was the mission speaker last year. And then Jason Bradley Krause, love you, was like, I'd love to nominate you to run for Visionaries of the Year. And I was like, oh my God. And we raised $70,000. We've raised over $110,000 towards for blood cancer. And really the mission within that is the Dare to Dream program, which is because of that 4%. And these treatments for kids they're old, they're outdated, they're made for adults. And so it's like, what are those things? So for me, it is a way to give back, but it's also, it really helps within your mental health too, to be able to, like, if I can have one person benefit from that, or one other person, or something I can do to make a difference. Or when Jacob was diagnosed, I didn't know anyone that had a kid that had AML. And sadly, any families that I heard about that their kids had AML did not have a good outcome. And so we met some other families there, and a little girl that was diagnosed with AML, same birthday as Jacob, but 4 years younger, so then we start talking to those parents. And then other people in the community, they've had daughters diagnosed with AML, and the parents reach out to me and say, are you willing to talk to them? Because, I mean, it's like 90 kids a year with infant ALL, 400 to 500 kids a year with AML. So this community, it seems small, but actually it is just, and you'll see the stats come up, it's way more rampant than you think. But it's like, if I can make one piece of a difference for that, for a family, for a teenager, for having this conversation here, then that's what I'm driven to do.
So Alice, how important really is, finding that meaning early on in the journey for these families when they first hear that diagnosis?
So I would say earlier on, you don't really have to find the meaning because they're
trying to find a lifeboat. I mean, they're really trying to,
right, yeah.
That's what they're trying to find.
So earlier on, all they're trying to do is to figure out what is going on. And so, like I said, we say it's 6 stages or 6 phases or 6 experiences, because sometimes you could be at phase 6 and then you will come back to phase 1. So it's not so linear. So earlier on, I think when something happens to a person, the first thing shouldn't be to move into, what does this mean? That's really the last. It's a process that the person has to get to themselves, that they have to move through the anger, they have to move through the sadness, they have to move through the bagging, they have to move through all of these things to get to acceptance, and then to come to, okay, what does this mean for it? And the meaning doesn't mean that, find a silver lining or be positive about it, but the meaning also, when we talk about our mental health, purpose also helps us to deal with the difficult things that happens in life. So somehow finding that purpose in it, that yes, this happened and it sucks, and I'm going to maybe deal with it for the rest of my life. How do I get through this? Maybe this is part of my coping skill to get through it. So the meaning for everybody listening, don't rush to that place. If you're not there, that's fine. Everyone is different and at a different level. Yeah.
Great advice. Chloe, pretend Jacob is not in this room. But I am curious, did the relationship you have with your older brother change at all? Did you feel like it needed to change? Did you want it to change? I mean, like, how did you navigate that? Because we do have some young kids in here, and maybe it's their relationship with their friends, right? Their classmates that get diagnosed, and these classmates don't know, how do I react now? What do I do? So can you walk us through your perspective?
Yeah, I think it definitely did change.
Don't look at him.
But even just the fact that, like, I always had someone, like, my age in the house, like, he was always there. He was always present. We did everything together, like family vacations and seeing each other every day, to the switch of seeing him maybe once a week, and it was not at home. And so when we were younger, like, obviously we fought, like, siblings fight, but it's like this saying of, like, you never know, like, what you truly have until it's gone. So, like, us arguing and stuff when we were little, and then as soon as he was out of the house, like, I didn't realize how much, like, I would miss that. Or even just, like, having, like, my brother, like, present in my house, and it was gone. And then I think once he came back, we became closer. We fight less now, but, like, we're so close with each other, more than other siblings, I would say. So, yeah, I think it definitely strengthened our relationship.
What advice would you give, other kids out there then, if they have a sibling or a friend that's going through this journey? I mean, did you find that you had to become more patient? Did you, like, any advice that you would give them?
Yeah, I think I would definitely say to, like, be positive and to always try and look on the bright side, because if you're always, like, in your head about negative things, like, it's going to start to consume you. And just trying to be supportive of everyone around you. I think that's really helpful.
Did she do that, Jacob? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I know we are getting kind of close to our time here. I think we could probably talk about this topic for hours here. I also want to open it up to questions. So if you have a question, don't be shy. Like, this is just our little living room inside this big church, but that's okay. Like, we are talking about some serious stuff. So, Grayson, if you have questions, anyone else has questions or wants to offer anything, just raise your hand. I mean, this is open forum here. I want to, near our close here, as we talk about resilience and growth. This is, just one step of the journey for so many of these families. How do you tell them to stay resilient when it comes to their mental health?
So, resilience. So the thing about resilience is dealing with the bad thing in the midst of it, and actually acknowledging that things are not going well, or this is not what you thought it would be, actually help. So that's one of those things where it's not about pushing your emotions away. It's not about not acknowledging it, but it's about acknowledging it and being in the moment. And then finding little acts that you can do, something called micro expressions. So what can you do for yourself in the moment, right? Are you eating, right? How is your sleep? Maybe that's not possible. That's not possible, but try it. Like, are you eating? Incorporating movement into your day, asking for help, and accepting the help. I think for a lot of parents, that's difficult because some parents can be perfectionists, so nobody can do it the way that I do it, right? So really accepting help and knowing that it's not going to be how you do it, but just being able to be like, hey, I need help. Can you do this for me? And also, there are things that are going to be not done, so it's okay for the house to be messy. It's okay for, let's say, if you're eating out, it's okay. That's fine. That accepting that you cannot do everything, but in the moment, what is the priority that you can prioritize?
That is so hard to tell. I think we all have the same personality, and I'll be looking at a room sometimes and say, "This is not okay." I mean, have you guys gotten to that point of saying it's okay?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're just recently kind of getting to, like, the quote-unquote other side. But a few things that we're kind of, like, really good pieces of advice that stood out related to what you were saying, Alice. So, well, one of the first things was right after diagnosis. You know, many people in the community reach out. There's like this huge outpouring of support, and I had a hard time accepting that. We were both very lucky that we were able to maintain our careers I ended up leaving a year into this, but at the time I was like, I feel so uncomfortable with this. And it was actually the psychologist at Children's that was like, this is your season of receiving. You will have a moment where it can be your season of giving. And that helped me in both understanding like, okay, this is not going to be forever, and it like kind of grounded me in there will be like an after this. Like we will not be in this really hard place. Like, and that was day 2 or 3. I didn't know where it was going, but I was like, we will get to the other side, whatever that looks like. And then once I started therapy, you know, I still have it up on my wall. It's a Post-it, and it just says in all caps, today, because my therapist would always say, what do you need today? Like, you're always, like, I try and I'm like, I want to figure all the things out. She's like, just focus on today. What do you need today? And kind of similar to that, I made this my mantra for a long time. It was like, be where you are. It's okay to feel this way and have to, like, move through it. Because you'll probably laugh at this, Alice, but really early on in therapy, I was like, okay, so, you know, what books should I be reading? And my therapist was like, I don't think you're ready for books. And I was like, because I just wanted to be like checking boxes, like, okay. And I literally just, remember a couple weeks ago when we were at the bookstore, he just bought me 2 books for like mental health. And so we're 3.5 years out now. But so that was like over a year and a half ago that I was like, what book should I read? You're not ready for books. So I think.
And it's okay.
And it's okay. And so it's that whole like, be where you are, like that helped me so much. So I hope that helps someone else.
I would say with your saying of the today, remember the day that Jacob was diagnosed on a Friday, we met his oncologist on a Monday, and Dr. Guanapero told me a couple of things. One of them, she asked if I worked. I said, yeah. She said, what do you do? And I said, I'm a consultant. She's like, well, no traveling, but you need to still work. She said, you need to work for you, and you need to work for Jacob. You need to do that. And then somehow, and when I'd be like freaking out, and she'd be like, Jennifer, you need to live for today. Live for today. That's what you need to do. And I'm looking at some people that I've consulted with quite a bit and some close friends. I am always looking around corners. I am like, what's next? What's this? What's that? I'm like, I live my life 2 days at a time, 3 days tops. And you're just going through, and the same thing with therapy. I didn't, like, my therapy was my girlfriends here, my other friends, my colleagues, and you know, spending time with family. That was my therapy. Or Kate and I, still one of my favorite moments, we went for a walk outside and she's wearing her slippers, and we're like, but who cares, you know? But I didn't start therapy, like, for me until like a year later. And I remember asking my therapist, I was like, can you, like, because I wanted to name it and claim it, right? I was like, so I have PTSD, right? And she's like, yeah, you know, but and then I was like, okay, what do we do? And how do we get through it? Because I'm like, oh, my game plan, I want to go. And it's a journey. It's a total journey. And I love that you do EMDR, because that is, so everyone talk to Ellie, mental health about that. But it is just, it's, you know, I don't have regrets. You know, you do the things that you need to do, but, you know, those things, that's why today is so important for, like, hey, let's learn, and how do we help with moving that forward, because you can only be sprinting a marathon so long before you need to take a break.
And I want to, some of you may know Heather Pick, who was my dear friend, and she was a former morning news anchor at 10 TV and passed away in 2008 from breast cancer. Her one phrase that she always said at the end of every newscast was, enjoy today. So when you said that, focus on today, you know, I realize now why she always said that. at the end of our newscast. Before we end, I do want to just ask you, Matt, because you do come to this conversation with such a unique perspective. Some of you may not know, but Matt is a cancer survivor himself. That's how I met him. Should I age us? Oh, wow, 2009? Really? Okay, so like not 2 decades ago. Woo. We're getting close. I was doing a story about Matt and multiple myeloma, and so you're coming to this space now from such a unique perspective. Like, how much of what you remember, what you went through as a young adult, and having to navigate that space with your parents, and now being the parent of a child with cancer?
Yeah, and as Kate mentioned at Cal's diagnosis, the first thing that the nurse told, Kate was still in recovery, and they said, we think that he has a malignancy in his blood, and I knew exactly what that meant. It's complicated because we've done a lot of genetic testing. Nothing has been found. I'm sure at some point there will be something found, but I felt a lot of, I somehow was the cause of this. But at the same time, I remember, so I was 25 when I was diagnosed, and I remember after I got out of my stem cell transplant thinking, this is actually the best thing that's ever happened to me. Changed my perspective, made me grow up a little bit. With Callahan, though, and I empathize with my parents a lot, because I knew when I was having a bad day or when I was scared. They didn't know like where my head was at because I was 25. With Callahan, I think in a lot of ways it prepared us, me going through it, questions to ask, things to advocate for. But I'll never get to the point that I got to where this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. I'll never understand why this happened to him. And so it's a little bit of a catch-22 of, I'm glad that I went through it to be able to kind of lean into that experience, but at the same time, I mean, I still feel like somehow I gave him bad genes that resulted in this.
Alice, what would you say to Matt if you were in a private room? Because
Your therapy is starting now.
and I think your message is a great way to close out this evening.
Yeah. And I think you're not alone, right? When you are a parent, you want to do your best, right? You want to pass on the best things. Unfortunately, when it comes to biology, you have no control over it. Biology does what it does, right? You can try to control it however you want, but you have no control over it. And this is the child that you were given. It's not your fault. All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Can we give our panelists a round of applause and some tissues? Oh my gosh. This conversation does not end today. As I said, just because Pediatric Cancer Awareness Month is now over, it does not end any of this. The space is there for us to continue this. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Please share this once that live stream gets shared. Thank you, Ellie Mental Health, for doing this, and United Methodist Church. We can continue this on and reach more people who we know could really hear some of these words that are spoken tonight. So thank you again, and reach out if you need anyone. We'll be around. Thanks. Chloe, exhale. You're done.